It's July 13th, 2023. This is Roqe. Hi there, welcome to episode 272 of Roqe. I'm Jian Ghomeshi. Hello to you from Canada. Hello to you from Toronto. Hello to you from middle north Toronto. Salam dostan aziz, durud bar shoma. Welcome, khosh omadi. Hope you're doing well. Wherever you are tuning in from around the world, we are on our ongoing mission to build a new audio-visual encyclopedia of Iranian diaspora identity. Smart Pegah is in the studio. Hello, Smart Pegah.
Hello.
Does having an accent make life harder? The proposition I put to you, people of Earth. Does having an accent make life harder? By the way, I labored over this question because first I had, is having an accent a liability?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Liability.
Well, exactly. These people with accents are not going to understand what that means.
Way to set the
stage.
stage.
Already making jokes. And this is a very actually sensitive subject. But no, I was thinking, well, maybe that's a little too pricey. What am I trying to? Why don't I just be simpler, clearer? Right. And then I was thinking, is having an accent problematic? But that one doesn't want to make the case or be subtly trying to suggest that we're assigning blame to the person who has an accent. We're walking into this saying it's neither right nor wrong to have an accent. The point is, does it make your life more difficult? Right. So it's kind of it's an extremely simplified question to what will inevitably be a complex conversation. But to get to the point of what we mean by this, I'm already issuing all the disclaimers.
I was going to say, it's like we haven't even...
for God's sake.
No, we can't even ask a question.
I barely said hello. Yeah. What we mean is, if you are coming from the east to the west, I mean, in as much as this program that we do it's for everybody around the world, it's for even Iranians inside Iran, but we're talking about the diaspora, mostly immigrants and Iranians who are around the world, and the dominant language now, the lingua franca, the worldwide language, is now English. So if English is not your mother tongue, it's your second language, or a third or fourth or fifth, and you are coming to the West, or you are speaking English with an accent, forget the grammar, we're talking about the accent, right? Does that make life more difficult for you socially, professionally? What are the implications? How does it shape the way people see you? And unfortunately, some studies show that it doesn't shape the way people see you so well, unfortunately. There are some negative associations that come with people having, especially if they have a heavy accent. Now, we have an expert coming on the show. By the way, she has made me promise that I have to dial down my exuberance, not my exuberance, but I can't be too grandiose in she says, don't make a big deal out of me. Don't give me all these titles and stuff, And I'm like, people who come on this show and pretend they have a PhD, we call a doctor. What am I have to call you a doctor? You really have a PhD.
Yeah.
Anyway, she is a professor. She's an academic. She's an author. She is a speaker, and she is the chair. She's the president of the Canadian Linguistics Association.
Wow.
Happens to also be my sister, my sibling.
Just happens to be.
Dr. Jila Ghomeshi is coming on the first time my sister's come on Roqe.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm excited to have her on the program. And she knows about this stuff. I mean, she did her PhD in Persian syntax.
Oh.
Yeah, I say that as if I have no idea what that means. Something about the way people speak, right?
That's
She's
helpful.
a linguist.
That's helpful.
Yeah, she's a linguist.
The way you've just minimized that entire
When
dissertation.
we were growing
of
up, my
hers.
dad would say, it was like everything, nobody understood what a linguist was. So my dad would say, well, of course, she understands this is a better car. She is linguist. And she was just like, Dad, that has nothing to do with being none of us know what it means. But it's something about the way people speak, why they speak, accents. She wrote a book. I can't understand the whole book. The whole book is in, like, it's
Have you
weird.
read it?
Yes, I tried to read it. Are you kidding me? I was so proud of her. I read the first page, and then I gave up. No, because in linguistics they have this whole language that
Linguists have their own language.
they do. It's
Okay.
a technical it's kind of science language. I don't know what it is. No, really. I mean, it's not. You have to study linguistics to understand what the linguistics book says. So, I mean, I sort of,
The circular reference here.
it's a disaster. Anyway, Dr. Jila Ghomeshi coming up to talk about this issue of having an accent. And this is something we've talked about on the show a number of times. It's come up amongst our team
Yes.
because there are team members we have who happen to be Iranian immigrants who've come here in the last few years, and some of whom have heavier accents than others, and some of whom say that it really does affect their lives, having an accent. Now, I put out a video yesterday on Instagram so we can get some comments before we
Such great
get into this. Let me ask you, did you anticipate the enthusiasm that this question would ignite?
I don't know. I was really excited about this episode.
Why were you excited?
Because I think it's, I've often thought about
Why do you speak that way? Is that a Toronto suburb accent that you have?
Probably.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Probably something like that.
Yeah.
But no, I really have. I've often thought about the struggles that individuals might have who have an accent or
Yes.
a more apparent accent. My sister and I, my poor mom, we bug her all the time, and we always say, can you say squirrel, or can you say certain words
Yeah.
that are a little bit more difficult?
Esquirrel.
Yeah, exactly. And we
yeah.
always have this like running joke at home. But it's so hard, and I often think about what implications that has, and then I relate it to the difficulties that I have speaking Farsi and how I feel speaking Farsi in
Yes.
situations where I'm uncomfortable speaking
Yes.
Farsi, because realistically, although it is my mother tongue, I am still more comfortable speaking
Yeah, you
English
don't speak
than-
with the fluency that I do.
Exactly.
Clearly.
That's
Yes.
right. Exactly.
Yes.
So, I was really excited to learn more about it and to hear, a professional's take on
Yeah.
this, and actually to learn about it. So I was excited.
My
but
sister's great, by the way. You want to, I mean, I'm not allowed to say these things because she sworn me to not say
I'm
anything
sure
good
she
about
is.
her. But she's very conscious. She's been on radio and TV. She talks a lot. She's very conversational. She's good. Hopefully this will be an educational kind of episode.
Well, that's
especially as in-
exactly what I was looking forward to. I want to learn a little bit more about the specifics of it. But I wasn't sure that everybody else would feel this way. So the fact that we've gotten some of the comments that we have and the level of enthusiasm that we've seen is amazing.
It touches a
I was blown
nerve.
away. Yeah.
I do think about my dad, my dear late father, a lot, because when it comes to the accent issue, because he had a heavy accent. And he had a heavy accent at a time. I'll put this to my sister. I'll put this to the doctor about whether she believes we're in a different era. I'm assuming, a more globalized world, a more immigrant-friendly place like Canada, I'm assuming means that things have become more tolerant, or
Hopefully.
or who knows actually. But coming up in the 80s and 90s when I was a kid, and my dad with this heavy accent, it was I wrote about this in a book, that it was really hard for me to see sometimes the way my father spoke, the way that would shape opinions and ideas about him. People would think him somehow lesser or uneducated or something, and he's a brilliant man. He's my hero. I got the tattoo on my arm of my dad's signature, but with this heavy accent and maybe some of his grammar and the way he would kind of sheepishly talk sometimes, it really did have an effect, I saw, on the way people saw him. Whereas in Persian, he was a different person almost. He had a different confidence. He had a different air about him. So, and this is what we're seeing in the comments. Some people saying,
for sure, the confidence issue is, I think, the most apparent, and I think that's something we've even heard within our team here, right? We've had that conversation before where it's, I feel more confident speaking in this language as opposed to the other, and being able to express yourself in one language versus the other. So all of that plays into it for sure.
Now, all of that is, I'm not conjecture, but that's personal opinions. And what I'm very curious about is what kind of studies, what kind of data, what kind of evidence is there that actually shows that this can have an effect on people getting a job, keeping their job, or being seen as able or trustworthy, or all of those things. And it's interesting. We are seeing some now. After I speak with Jila, after we have the interview, we're going to go through some of the comments because we've got some great comments, and some of our prominent, even former guests are commenting on this, and so we'll go through some of those. But I am noticing, first of all, there's a diversity of comments.
Yep.
There are people who are very clearly saying having an accent absolutely shapes the way people see you and makes life harder, and who are directly saying, I had trouble getting a job in TV or something because of my accent, etc. Then there are others saying
not so much,
or it shows that we can speak different languages. I'm proud of it.
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
See, that's something I always thought and kind of still do is that, you should be proud.
Well, of course. It's not.
I think it is so difficult to learn a new, honestly, I keep going back to Farsi, even though I've grown up with Farsi, but it is so damn hard. It is so hard for me to learn certain aspects of the language. And I can only imagine the reverse, learning English. It's just as difficult.
I just feel it's like a bit virtue signaling to say but isn't everybody great because they can speak more than one language? Absolutely. In fact, when I'm traveling, as somebody who lives in Canada, and if you go to certain parts of Canada, it can be a unilingual country. I mean, it's officially bilingual with French and English, but there's a lot of people who just speak English in this country. Yeah. And so you go to somewhere like middle of Europe and everybody speaks 5 languages and you go, wow, look at these people. This is amazing. And absolutely, it's a challenge. It's amazing that Iranians or whoever, immigrants who come and can speak more than one language, kudos to you, but that I don't want to, people shouldn't, this isn't about giving people a badge or a medal. I feel like let's have a real conversation.
No, I
agree. Does it fuck you up to have does it affect your life in a negative way to have an accent?
Here's the thing. I agree with you that we should have a real conversation about this, but I also strongly believe in the fact that it really is something to be proud of, to be able to, first of all, uproot your life and come somewhere else. All of that. We've talked about this numerous times and how much I respect and appreciate that. But also on top of that, to be able to learn a brand new language and then have to be part of a society that speaks and communicates in this completely different way than you're used to. Of course, that's something to be proud of.
And by the way, something I'll ask Jila about, but, I think the impressions that people have, say, in Iran of somebody speaking Persian with, say, an American accent differ from the way an American sees a Persian speaking English. This is because, again, I think because English is the dominant language, there's kind of an entitlement, a pretentiousness of you need to learn how to speak English, whereas some of the other smaller countries in the world would be like, oh, you've learned to speak our specific little language in our country, and good for you, and we'll pat you on the back and thank you for it.
And if you don't, or if you stumble, we'll accommodate you. But the reverse here, it's almost like you feel like you need to learn the language.
Right.
Yeah.
And so in as much as this can lead to a global community conversation, and can be helpful in that sense. I hope it will, and I hope it does. I hope this conversation with Jila and the comments that we're getting will all foster more of that, and maybe we'll even continue it. It's not since the Khoresh debate, although nothing is as enthusiastic. Nobody's as enthusiastic about anything as they are that.
Definitely, we're
the
still
way
getting
we
comments.
say Khoresh. I know what is
I can't believe it. All of these incredible episodes that we've had.
Yeah.
And
Fatsani Moghadam talking about democracy.
Exactly.
Now,
and yet
how do you
Khoresh.
how do you say Khoresh?
Exactly.
Is the debate, right?
Amazing.
Okay. So Pegah will come back to you right after you're going to sit and listen to this conversation. Jila's about to join me. I should mention we're coming to you on roqemedia.com. It is there that you can link to all of our platforms. roqemedia.com is the website. That's where our funnies are, our back episodes, our videos, everything. That's the hub of all things. We are also on a number of platforms. We're on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Instagram, CastBox. join us on any of those. If you like to see some visuals with Roqe and you don't usually check us out on YouTube, you can see, in fact, some of full interviews are up there just on video on YouTube. And if you like your Roqe descriptions, both in English and in Persian with an accent or not, check us out on Telegram. Remember, you can support this program by going to our website, roqemedia.com, and pressing the Support Us button, funny enough. And you can become a Roqe member by joining our Patreon page. We really appreciate that. It's a few bucks a month. If you're a regular listener or audience member and you haven't done that already, we would really appreciate it that you do. We're trusting you. Okay, let's get started. It's no secret that as the population of Iranians in the diaspora grows massively each year, so does the number of people navigating the lingua franca of the world, English, with an accent. Globalization has surely led to more accents of all stripes in all corners of the world. But for Iranian immigrants in particular, the notion of having an accent can be quite impactful on their lives. What are the pitfalls and perils of having a heavy accent? Are there positives as well? How does having an accent affect the way people are perceived, admired, hired, or dismissed? Does having an accent make you sexy or silly? Does it matter what the accent is, and who is the person with it? Well, to address all of these questions on this special themed edition of Roqe, we thought we'd turn to someone who has pondered these issues professionally and is the award-winning president of the Canadian Linguistics Association. She also happens to be my sister. Dr. Jila Ghomeshi has been a professor at the University of Manitoba for over 2 decades after completing a PhD in linguistics at the University of Toronto on the syntax of Persian. She is a published author who has been the Associate Dean Chair at the Faculty of Arts at U of M, and her scholarly work is in the field of Iranian linguistics, and she's been a member of an informal network of scholars in Europe and North America working on Iranian languages for her entire career. She mentors and supervises students working on linguistics of Iranian languages, and right now, Dr. Jila Ghomeshi joins me from Winnipeg, Manitoba today. Hello.
Hello. I can't express strongly enough how much I wish I could be right there.
Yes, actually, Roham was saying, where is she? He thought you were coming into the studio. It seemed strange that a sibling is on the show and is on the other side of the country.
Yeah, well, that's the way we've lived.
So with your esteemed career, I'm actually really, there's so many things that come up on this show, and we think we should have Jila on. And first, I think this is the first time we've had you on, Roqe, and it's such an honor. Thank you for making the time.
It's an honor to be here,
Dr. Ghomeshi.
I'm a huge fan. It's I can't believe that I'm a guest. I listen faithfully.
These are all the things you're required to say. Thank you. But also, I'm particularly glad that you're coming on for this, because this is a subject that's come up sort of repeatedly here and there, and we've thought we need somebody to talk to about this. We actually did when Clubhouse was a thing a couple of years ago, we did a session which you were part of that we talked a bit about accents then, and I was thinking about some of the questions that came up from that conversation. So this is a conversation that has elements that affect a lot of the people listening, Iranians around the world, including our family members who have in varying degrees accents. So I thought we would, and I hope you're not going to get too academic and nuanced throughout this conversation, because I know that everything has a way of nuancing, but I thought we'd start by just some definitions to get that part out of the way. So how do we define having an accent, or how do we define a person with an accent?
Everybody has an accent. So I mean, there's no, I think the way that the word accent is used is somebody who speaks differently from the way I do. So that's what you perceive as an accent. But as soon as you're among people who are different speakers, I mean, as soon as you travel anywhere, if you go to Australia or you go to the United Kingdom, people are going to say you have an accent because you don't speak the way they do. So really, an accent is the way you pronounce words. And if you didn't have an accent, you would actually be silent.
Sure, but everyone knows. That's a very good nuanced response, and I appreciate that. Everyone has an accent, but we know what we mean when we say, "Oh, I just met this fabulous Spanish person at the subway. They have a heavy accent." People know what we're talking about.
Sure, but as I said, you've probably also heard people tell you you have an accent and find it charming
Never.
when you're
No
traveling.
one's ever told me that.
But yeah, if you mean, I mean, so there's different accents of your first language. So, you know, maybe that's what you're saying is, you know, it's harder to imagine, you know, consider Australian versus UK versus American as different accents, but they are. But because they're all still, you know, the first language of speakers. But maybe you're talking about people who are speaking English as an additional language as an adult, and then they have a different kind of accent. Yeah. That's the accent of it's the accent of having acquired English as an adult.
Yeah.
And not everybody has one of those. That's right. So that marks you as somebody who acquired English later in life.
And I think for the purpose of this conversation, that's how I tried to set it up in the introduction, that we're talking about English. We're talking about basically Iranians or immigrants, let's say, in the English world, in the Western world, trying to navigate English. Because you're right, it's a bit of a rabbit hole talking about accents. And I'll actually get to an interesting story about that I had in preparation for this. So let me ask you this. Do people, this might seem like a strange question, but I think it's come up throughout my lifetime where somebody will, even someone with a pronounced accent when they're speaking English from a different mother tongue, as you say, will not realize that they're speaking with that much of an accent. Do people realize they have an accent when they speak, or is it only when other people tell them that they have an accent that they realize it?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the way we talk about it. Oh, so-and-so has an accent. They don't realize that they have an accent, and they don't even realize there's an interesting study of the way that even different English speakers sound and how those different ways of sounding can mark things like your age and your level of education and the part of the country you're from and what groups you align with. And so, you know, there's micro differences, even with people who have the same, you know, accent, and we're definitely not aware of those. And the interesting thing, I was just, for me in preparing for this, I was thinking about we, especially as diaspora people, you and me, we know a lot more about that in the English context than we do in the Iranian context. Yeah. But there's just beginning to be work on mapping out the languages that are spoken in Iran, in the different provinces of Iran, and Iranian speakers can recognize the accent of a Gilaki speaker or a, Rashdi speaker or whatever when they're speaking Persian. But it's just that you and I wouldn't be very good at that. But we're better at sort of distinguishing Newfoundland English from Vancouver.
I'm getting better at understanding the different Iranian regional twangs. But we say, don't we say dialects for that? What's the difference between an accent and a dialect?
So an accent is just the phonetic properties, so the way things sound. And a dialect would have other like grammatical properties, like, or lexical, like word choices. So a dialect would be more significantly different in other ways, not just in the sounds.
And is a particular or a highly unique way of talking an accent? Like I was thinking about Donald Trump and how Donald Trump has this way of talking that is so easy to mimic, that there's all these comedians doing the Donald Trump voice. I mean, yes, he has a New York accent, but that's not really what we're talking about. He's got this nasal thing and he's got these affectations. Is that an accent or what is that?
I don't think it would be an accent if it's specific to one person. Like, so, even whenever we talk about a dialect or a language, like somebody can make up their own language and start using it. I know somebody on this call who did that as a child. You were very creative that way, but, you wouldn't necessarily like, you say it's a made up language or whatever, but it isn't a language because it's limited to one person. So no, to be an accent or a dialect, it has to hold of a group of people, an identifiable group of people.
Okay. Although he has the Queen's, the New York accent.
The New York part, but there's idiosyncrasies, as you say, those kind of highly mimicable aspects of his speech that I think are quite unique to him. Yeah.
Okay, so let me get into really the impetus for having this conversation today, and that is how, and we've been talking about this in amongst the Roqe team for a while. Some of the team, of course, having heavier accents than others, and talking about how that affects their lives, they feel. Let me start with this basic question. How much does having an accent play into how we perceive the person who has the accent?
A lot. I mean, I think, including all the other ways that people present themselves. So the way they dress and the way they move and their, all of those, we're instantly sizing people up. So, but I actually looked up the work of a linguist who's done some great work. I'm going to mention him because if somebody wants to find a great short TED talk that outlines what I'm about to talk about, this would be the guy. His name is John Baugh, Baugh. But he's done a lot of research on linguistic profiling, and he defines linguistic profiling as when a person is denied access to otherwise available goods and services by phone, sight unseen, based exclusively on the sound of their voice. So it's equivalent to racial profiling, but linguistic profiling is you don't even see them. It's just their voice. And you're going to decide on the basis of that whether you make something available. And his research was based on, he's actually a very skilled he's dexterous, he's African American, but he can sound white, so to speak. And he can also do a very good kind of Mexican American accent. And he, based on his own experiences, he did linguistic research where he would call up prospective landlords who had apartments available for rent in one of those three accents. And, the fact is that when he had the African American accent or the Mexican American accent, it was more likely that the landlords would say that the place had already been rented or it was no longer available. And so that's an example of linguistic profiling where your accent is actually denying you access to things that you have a right to get.
Right. There was a study I was looking at on that very note when you mentioned the phone calls, where accents had a major effect on a customer service perception. So it turns out that many companies such as Apple and Dell and I think Capital One have, I guess, been obliged to close down their overseas customer services call centers. Those call centers, they relocated them to the U.S. because of all this customer dissatisfaction, and customers' perception towards foreign call service employees was the main motive for this relocation. And I guess the conclusion being that consumers were assessing call services differently based on call center location and cultural similarities. Now, you wouldn't know any of those things. You wouldn't know where the person is. You're just simply basing that on the way they're speaking, right? What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, I think it's awful, but in the sense that judgments that are, that deny people something they're entitled to is awful. But that's about what we do with this information that we receive through our senses, whether it's the way someone talks or the way someone looks, skin color, our perceptions about their class, all those things. But I've often tried to also make the point that the fact that we can be so discriminating in the other sense of the word, that we can hear an accent and be able to identify so many things from that is actually kind of amazing. And we do it kind of unconsciously. So, there's all kinds of information that we're, it's like a computer. We're just computing all kinds of information based on sounds. So I deplore the negative things we do with it, like, this person sounds different, therefore they're less than. Like I said, I remember being a kid, and I remember the first time this dawned on me, hearing our parents talk about someone having an Italian accent or a Spanish accent. And I couldn't hear the differences when I was a kid. And I thought they had some superpower. Like, I was just amazed that they could identify, what country people were from their accent. I mean, now I can do it, but I remember that sort of being dazzled by it. And I still think it's a dazzling thing that we can do. I just wish we didn't use it for bad things.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot as I research this, because because he had a heavier kind of accent, and also because it was a time. I mean, I want to ask you a little bit about how you perceive this moment versus, say, 20 or 30 or 40 years ago, et cetera. But just on the negative scale, I'll come back to that as well. On the negative scale, I found a study that was even worse than the one I just, in terms of the impact, than the one I just cited. This is a study in the University of Chicago that tested the effect accents have on credibility. And the study found that when a person with an accent made a factual statement, people were less likely to believe that statement was true. And the heavier the accent is, the less believable the statements would be. This reminds me of those studies that show if the person is considered more attractive, they're considered more trustworthy, that type of thing. Does this jive with what you've learned?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think based on the work of the linguist I cited and others, I mean, there's more and more research in this area, and it all I mean, there's no study being conducted where it's like, oh no, accent makes no difference in the way, you know, like 100% people are judgmental. I mean, one thing that a story he told was that the original example of linguistic profiling is actually in the Bible. I mean, one of the original. Yeah. And this was a cute story because I didn't know the origin of this word, but there's a word shibboleth.
Yes.
And I've heard it in linguistics. Oh, you know this story.
I saw that. I know the story. Yeah. Go ahead. I found it in the research as well. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've always known a shibboleth as something that, I thought it was a linguistic term, but it actually means something like ear of corn. But in the Bible, it was used by certain people. The pronunciation of it was used to distinguish people from one area from another. And basically, if you said it with an S, sibboleth, you got killed.
Yes.
So, I mean, you know, and so that this John Baugh makes the point that that's linguistic profiling.
Back to the Bible. Back to the Bible. Yeah. There was accent profiling. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
But I mean, I think we can rise above it. You know, I think, you know, like many things, we, you know, many of us know better. The other issue that comes up is this idea that, I mean, it's sort of without basis, this idea that, well, you know, if somebody's been here for 10 or 20 years, shouldn't they be able to speak perfectly? And you're, you know, this is another interesting thing about accent is that if you move, like you and I moved to Canada before we were, you know, hit puberty, basically. Yeah. And so we grew up with English accents, and we came here and we were able to adapt to a Canadian accent without, I mean, nobody taught us. I mean, you know, you and I both have shared anecdotes about certain words we practiced. For me, it was purple, you know, trying to get that R. But had we moved in our later teens or our adult lives, we would still have that British accent. Yeah. And so,
by the way, I don't know if you remember, but I was very intent on losing my English accent. Yeah. You know, little did I know how it could come in handy later in life. As a charming kind of thing, I thought I just want to, you know, I'm already feel different. I've got this funny name, and the nose and all of that. The last thing I wanted was an English accent.
And because you were younger, 3 years younger, part of we're going to devolve into sibling jealousy, but you were able to do it way quicker than me. And I was super jealous. Like, you sounded Canadian. To me, it felt like in a matter of weeks.
Right.
But it's also actually that some people are better or worse at picking accents up. I mean, there's still people who say, oh, when I travel, I immediately pick up the accent of the people I'm around. So there's individual talent, but there's also this age effect that the older you are, the harder it is that, you know, those things are far more set, and it's unlikely that you're going to be able to switch them. So for our dad versus our mom, you know, there was an age difference, and our dad had our mom had come again to North America as a younger person, and so was imprinted with North American patterns of speaking, but our dad didn't have that. So it's a bit, I think, unfair to hold that against somebody.
Of course. But when I intimate that I should have hung on to my English accent, you know, my London accent, it's because generally people find the English accent, I mean, some people, many people maybe, attractive. They watch The Crown and they go, oh, listen to the way everybody's talking, or they find a comedian with an English accent and they like it, or they think it's sexy or something, which raises the question how accents are perceived differently based on where in the world they're from. It occurs to me that the Iranian accent or the Arabic accent are not at the top of the list in terms of what's considered charming or seductive. How are we to understand that?
Yeah, I mean, human beings we make everything into a symbol, like everything's symbolic of something else. So yeah, you hear an accent and it's associated with a certain set of things that are desirable, and you hear another accent and it's associated with things that are not desirable, and they become symbolic systems. So the French accent has this kind of symbolism, or the Queen's English has a kind of symbolism. One of the points I think that linguists try to make is it's not built into the sounds themselves. It's this act, there's nothing inherently better about the Queen's vowels and consonants than there is about,
it's socialized perceptions. We think the French accent is sexy because we learned that from movies or something.
And I mean, a lot of it comes from who's using it. So one of the things is that if someone's powerful or good looking or rich, their accent is going to be revered.
Interesting.
And same for countries. I mean, countries that are, first world successful countries,
But isn't there something to the idea that famously the German or Russian way of talking sounds more gruff and robust and sort of, I don't know, curt than the Italian or the French romantic kind of sound?
Yeah, I mean, that's true. Like there's that, the comparison of the French versus the German, and, kind of comically kind of drawing on the smoothness of one and the jarring nature of the other. But, but again, within Germany, for example, if you get, different ways of speaking, it's going to, the dialect that sounds better to people is going to map onto a social category, like people who are of a better class, because that's how those associations are formed. So yeah. The other thing that's interesting is that language is constantly changing. So, the standard Canadian or the standard American or the standard UK accent of today will not be the one of 50 years from now.
Interesting.
And the people who change it, at first, so, one of the vowels change constantly. And so if I'm going to say the same sentence with two different pronunciations of the word to, and tell me what the second one sounds like to you. So I can say, it's better if you close your eyes, but I can say, I think so too, or I think so too.
Yeah, they sound different.
Yeah, I think so too. So if you have ew instead of ooh, which you hear a lot now, what does that signify to you? Tew.
That sounds kind of, it doesn't sound educated.
If you listen, I think the Kardashians do a lot of that with creaky voicing.
Right. Yeah, that's what it sounds like. Yeah.
Tew. Yeah. And so what's interesting is, if we're all heading there, like if that's what we all sound like in 50 years, that'll be a change, it'll have changed. And we'll look back and we'll go, oh, these people were actually at the forefront of that change. But when it starts, when you hear something like that for the first time, it always sounds,
sure.
It's easy to put it down.
Yeah. There's some things I want to say about that too, but just when you said human beings, we are human beings, it just made me, the question came to mind. I mean, do other mammals have different accents, or are we the only, I don't know if this is outside of the scope of your expertise, but I mean, does I don't know, like a seal or a monkey from another continent have a different way of communicating than one from North America? Or?
No, but there's been some interesting stuff done on bird song, and I think there's some. I don't know the research off the top of my head, but I think that there's dialects in bird song, and if the baby birds aren't exposed to their dialect early enough, I think there's something kind of parallel, but I don't know if anything in dogs and cats.
Okay. I should also note, I should have said this maybe at the top, that I am generally referencing Iranians speaking English with an accent. I've spoken to many Iranians. In fact, I was talking to somebody about this who is a more recent immigrant from Iran who's come a few years within the last decade. And I was saying people talking with an accent. And she said, "Yeah, it's really funny." And she thought I was talking about how English people speak Persian, right? And but what was interesting about that is almost all the Iranians I've spoken to about the way, say, an American speaks Persian or an English person think it's cute or charming. Having an accent in Persian, maybe it's just the gratitude that somebody's trying to speak Persian at all or something, but it's very different from the way Iranians are perceived when they're speaking English. It's quite a paradox.
Yeah, it is. Again, I think that's more like geopolitics, right? Than it is we're equally, bad at that native accent. But as you say, the idea of foreigners attempting to learn Persian
Right.
is a welcome idea, yeah.
So I want to throw out a theory, and it's kind of a it's kind of a an aggressive one. So you might want to come back on it and disagree with it. But I think when I was sort of thinking about this and going deep into it, I think one accents and the way people speak is one of the last frontiers where you are openly able to be prejudicial.
Yeah.
Because we live in this era where everybody's become sensitive, in most cases, thankfully, some cases a little too much for me, but when it comes to, say, skin color, or even as you were saying, the way someone dresses or whatever, we've the size somebody is, the background they have, but people say they face ridicule, condescension, even hostility for having an accent. And to a certain extent, it seems like while there has been a lot of consciousness raising about race and ethnic issues, there's still intolerance over the way other people speak, that it's acceptable to criticize or discriminate against people with non-standard ways of speaking English. Oh, this person is doing this wrong, I'm going to attack them. Why is this the final frontier, if you accept my theory?
It's many other brilliant minds like yours have come up with this theory too. As for the explanation of why it's the final frontier, I think maybe because so much of what we do linguistically isn't conscious. So we're not aware. We're not aware of our own language acquisition. We're not aware of our own accents. That's why I love linguistics, because for me it was this constant learning about something that we all do, but learning about it consciously. So because we're not conscious of it, I think we underestimate, for example, how easy it is for someone to switch accents, or even though I also think if anyone has tried to learn an additional language, they know how difficult it is. But I think maybe it has something to do with that. And also, we're not free of all the other isms yet, like racism and gender.
No, but let me play devil's advocate. It's not possible to change one's skin color. Is it, though, is part of the problem here that somebody would say, well, this person can learn to speak better? They can learn to say this, that they use English in the standard way. Why are they, continuing with this accent?
Yeah, but I think the kind of person who holds that belief probably is somebody who's monolingual and who hasn't tried to learn an additional language, which, by the way, globally is a minority of people. Like most people in the globe are multilingual. So growing up and hearing a number of different languages and acquiring them. So yeah, I would say that that's a belief. It's a mistaken belief, but it would be held by someone who, hasn't really tried themselves to learn another language.
So, Jila, how much is the issue of an accent about perceived education level? I have a quotation from a guy named Sam Chouat. He's a speech therapist and director of the New York Speech Improvement Service, who says, speech has always been a popular indicator of education and intelligence. This is a guy who, by the way, counts amongst his accomplishments teaching Robert De Niro to shed his New York accent for his role in Cape Fear so that he, as the villain, would presumably sound smarter, right, without the accent. So Mr. Chouat added, to me, it's cosmetic. It has nothing to do with your logic, fund of information, or ability to problem solve. So what is the correlation with perceived education level?
Well, that one, we're switching between accents of different English speakers and then accents of speakers of other languages speaking English. But so it makes more sense if we're talking about different English speakers, but there's lots of different varieties of English. And you may have learned one that is farther away from the standard English. And so then, one of the arguments is if you learn standard English, that's going to help you on the job market, in education, writing essays, navigating, the workforce, because standard English is sort of the lingua franca of what we do. Same thing in Iran, standard Persian. You don't speak your home kitchen language, you learn this. So there's always a standard language of education and government. But people have a lot of different varieties at their fingertips, so to speak, or their mouths, and they don't always want to sound, sometimes in some contexts it's pretentious to speak standard English, and people have other varieties of English that they use, and we all switch. I think one thing that's frustrating as an additional language learner is you don't get to choose your variety. So I've actually heard from people, who learned English in a classroom, the frustration with coming and hearing colloquial slang and, people joking and not being able to participate because all they know is this sort of formal, English that they learned in the classroom, or vice versa. I mean, if you learn English, from your hoodlum friends or whatever, you may feel that you have lack of access to all kinds of things because you don't know the standard form. So, I mean, ultimately, it's good if we have a variety of registers at our fingertips. And most of us do in our first language. It's harder to get that in our second, third language.
But you see, I want to tell my Iranian friends or the people working at Roqe Media or everybody listening that no matter how heavy an accent you have, a Iranian accent, that you won't be judged. But this thing about perceiving someone as educated or not is not insignificant. And this is where I think of Dad again, because Dad was, as you know, he was very smart and sometimes very profound and certainly very charming in Persian. And he was a lot of times none of those things in English. And we have those horrible moments in childhood where, we would go to a store and I'd be embarrassed because Dad had this heavy accent, and the perception would be he's not smart. And I would be like, this man is this great engineer and he's this smart man and he's this charming and seductive man and all these things. And they're not seeing any of that because he's speaking with this heavy accent. That stuff stings, and I don't know, maybe that's totally different in 2023, but I don't think it entirely is. And I don't know what to tell people if they ask me honestly, is it going to affect my life if I have a heavy Persian accent navigating through, say, rural Canada?
But it's not, in that case, it's not just the accent. It's also the grammar and the vocabulary. Like, when you're learning a new language and you don't have an extensive vocabulary in any language, it's hard, especially if it's hard to make jokes, it's hard to express complex ideas. It does harm us. It isn't the accent alone. If you had all that other stuff, the wide vocabulary, the command of the grammar, the ability to joke and use figurative language, the accent wouldn't be the impediment. So it's about a less than full acquisition of that language, which is extremely frustrating. I mean, we all have to go through those stages when we're learning a language, where we're, beginners, and then we're intermediate. And there's a lot of things you can't do at those beginner stages,
Right.
but you can improve a lot of those things. Like saying the accent isn't going to change doesn't mean you can't acquire more vocabulary, acquire the grammar. So there's a lot of hope. But, and the accent then becomes something charming. There's people who kind of plateau at a certain level because they're not trying, their language is good enough for what they need to do, and that's okay too. But if it matters for what you want to do, you can improve a lot of things.
It does have an effect on people, and it can, in terms of those who have a heavy accent, it can affect self-esteem. Many people can feel shy or somehow deficient. I can only guess that's because some kind of stigma still exists, like they're not just making this up, I don't know how she'll feel about me using her as an example, but Parisar, who works with us, she has an accent, and there was a group discussion a few days ago, and we were speaking about something that she's very smart, and she knows about this particular, issue that we were talking about, and she was totally silent. The conversation was in English. And afterwards I said, why didn't you say anything? Come on, you should have. And she said, well, I didn't feel comfortable because I can't speak English well enough and they would have judged me. And I said, well, no, you speak well enough, but that's where she's at. She will not enter the conversation in English that she would enter in Persian. How do we change that? How do we make the dynamic so that somebody feels comfortable in those conversations? Well,
I mean, we have to become tolerant in so many ways. Like, we have to do better in so many ways that it sort of feels like this would be a drop in the bucket. But I would say giving space and patience and to someone who doesn't have perfect language skills or, sophisticated language skills, separating what they have to say from the way they say it. So, even with rudimentary language skills, somebody can express complex ideas, even when they don't have language skills yet. I mean, I remember the miracle of, when I was had a parent of a very small child, before that child could speak, they could communicate a lot of things, but, as a parent, you're looking for that, you're and you realize that there's all range of things that this kid, my kid could tell a story before they were verbal. I think it's sad that we assume that if we judge based on how someone expresses themselves, the weight of what they have to say, and we have to separate those things out and say, everyone's worth listening to, and everybody potentially has something valuable to contribute, even if it's not expressed in the most sophisticated way. But like I said, that's like, the work to become more tolerant is yes, a big one.
It's a mountain to climb.
Yeah.
I mean, let's turn it around. Is having an accent ever an advantage? It occurs to me that some celebrities or movie stars, I think of Sofia Vergara, who was on that Modern Family show for years, kind of trading on the fact that she has this accent, this Colombian, Spanish accent, gets a lot of positive attention. Is that an exception, or is that sometimes what happens in society?
Well, I think it points to the fact that you can be funny despite the accent. You can be sexy despite the accent. You can be smart despite the accent. Like, I think,
not despite, but because of, to a certain extent. I mean, it's seen as an advantage.
In her comedy.
Right. Yeah.
So I do think that's probably about her comedic skills. She's using it in her toolbox. And I've seen other comedians who use who express their comedy through their accents. So I think it can become a toolbox for for a lot, or can be part of your toolbox for a lot of things. But I think, I don't think you could, again, isolate the accent and say this one's a funny one. It can't be separated from the way the person uses it.
There's something that I've talked to you about before that but I'm going to ask you professionally now, which is And this has happened on Roqe a number of times. Somebody will come on the show and they'll have a bit of a Persian accent when they're speaking English. And then I'll say, oh, when did you come from Iran? And they'll say, when I was 2 years old. And I'll think, well, why do you have an accent? I mean, this is like some sort of adopted thing that happens based on their friends they hang out with or their family, or what is that? What do we call that?
I don't have a word. I can't think of a word. I mean, it's the opposite of, we have a word, accommodation, for when you take on the accent,
Wow.
that isn't yours, of people around you. So maybe it's a kind of accommodation, but it's I mean, all of us are unconsciously aligning ourselves with groups of people. Like that's what we're doing always with our language. Like it's part of our identity work. And so that's a person who's, expressing more of their Iranian rather than their North American identity. And going back to the person who uses creaky voice or whatever, everybody's doing that in one way or the other. It's just maybe more obvious with somebody who has an accent.
Do we judge that? I mean, like when Madonna moved to England and then suddenly started using an English accent. I mean, that seemed just fake to me. But are we supposed to be tolerant of that?
Yeah, the answer to do we judge that? Like really, 100% is going to be no from me.
Right.
Like, you're never going to hear, oh yeah, we judge that.
Yes, of course I'm being playful, but I mean, is it, can we call it out? Can we go, why are you saying Starbucks instead of Starbucks? You fucking grew up in Vancouver,
We can with people that we're close to,
okay.
but you can't, you can. That would be a way of teasing them. Yeah.
Do people with accents feel more comfortable with other people who have different accents? Remember when we were kids and we first moved to Canada, we moved to an area called Don Mills, and we immediately, at least I immediately gravitated towards the other immigrant kids, the other first generation immigrant kids, a Pakistani kid, a black kid, Omar and Rabina, So how much of that is accents too? I mean, how much of that has to do with both of our parents have heavy accents, so you're a brother, you're a sister?
I don't know. I don't think there is that. I mean, I think the immigrant non-immigrant is a huge one, like first generation versus settler colonial all the way back in Canada, like I think those are huge in every, now people talk about being first generation in academia or anywhere, like you're the newcomer, but I don't think that has to do with accent. I mean, I think it's got to do with are you new to this place, or are you do you have the entitlement that comes from having been here forever, so yeah.
Okay, you don't have an answer for this, it seems.
No, I was just I was going on and on hoping you'd interrupt me. I don't have an answer for that.
Thank you. I just thought
I don't know if
point out to the audience that you didn't have an answer for that one.
Yes, yeah, thanks. I mean, I know of research. I don't even know of a research project on that question, which makes me think that there's nothing. Like, people research a lot of things, but no one's researched that, which probably means it's a dead end. Like, it just doesn't, it's not a thing that people with accents, and I think there's a lot of cases where people, I mean, even if you have an accent, you appreciate people who don't, so you don't want to hang out with people who have, like, everyone appreciates the person who sounds the most comfortable, in the way they're speaking.
Do we, how do we feel? Do we judge?
Oh my goodness.
No. How do we feel about classes to help evolve or get lessen the accent? When I was doing the research, I found that some linguists question the value of accent reduction instruction, arguing that accents should not be treated as impairments, particularly when they don't hurt communication. Some even say that the lessons prey on fears that these people have of, I've got to lose my accent. What is your, do you have a particular prescription when it comes to this on accents and whether people should be scrambling to lose them or not?
Well, first of all, I don't know how effective they are. So if there was a really effective accent reduction course that someone could take, and at the end of 12 weeks they had less of an accent, I wouldn't discourage someone from taking that, like, but I don't think that it's that easy. I don't, and so I feel like this is a for-profit enterprise that's preying on insecurity without delivering results, and then I would be against that. And I think instead what we should be doing is preaching tolerance and encouraging people to even the people who are subject, I mean, it shouldn't be up to them to do the work, but everyone should try to encourage more tolerance around different styles of speaking and ways of speaking. So I don't think it's that easy. I mean, I think there might be people who could benefit from that kind of service, but I think mostly it's a way to take people's money for something that is an insecurity.
Do you think it's easier to have an accent in the way, like say in Canada today, than it would have been 30 years ago? I mean, that would be I guess the orthodox thinking that we're progressing and everything's getting more, people are having more understanding, and we're becoming more globalized, so everybody understands that this is part of the package. What do you think?
At this point, I mean, I think if I had answered that question 20 years ago, I would have said, 100%, things are better. But I've been so disappointed lately by things that have happened in the last 10 years in the world that I've lost faith that we're just always progressing towards the good. And I think we're sometimes more tolerant and sometimes less tolerant in ways that are shaped by things that I don't fully understand. Like, when we feel like we don't have enough, then we start to get really judgmental about other people. Let's keep them out. Like, I mean, I don't think we're more welcoming of immigrants now. But I think
you do not think we're more welcoming.
Actually, in Canada, yeah. But I'm thinking of it, around the world. I feel like there's still on balance more fear of the other than there is, welcoming. So, but as I said, I think that's probably because of other things. So I think Canada has always been a model of, a place where people can come, because there's so many people from so many different places. I think it's one of the most tolerant places in the world. So I like living here.
To a certain extent, yeah, I think so. That's probably true. It's great talking to you. It's really fun. I mean, it was an interesting conversation. It's been, if I can come back to where we started, we're going to title this episode, Does Having an Accent Make Life Harder, or something like that. And everyone's going to know what it means. But what you said at the beginning is probably maybe the most instructive or profound part of all of this, which is that we all have an accent. And that, so we're all running around speaking with an accent, and some people just have variations of it, I suppose. I hate how linguistic, how pure that is. How it's like your thing where you never judge the language. You say, well, it's evolving. Like we had this big debate last month about the Khoresh. You probably would say, people will just say the language evolves. You probably don't have a position on that, right?
I love debates like that because they spur so many good conversations. And so I had these conversations with some Iranian linguistic students, actually, and it was a really good, I mean, not that we resolved it. I mean, the diversity of opinions reflected that you got was equal, but I did learn more than I knew about how many different ways styles of speaking there are in Iran. I mean, it's just so delightful to hear that. When we're talking about Iranians speaking English, it's just somehow we homogenize all of them, but there's just such a range of ways of speaking. And so I really liked learning about that, including Khoresh.
And you would and I'm guessing you would say there's no right or wrong. It's tediously correct. Oh, there's no right or wrong. Even some.
You know what? When you talk about right or wrong, that's a slippery slope to saying everyone should talk the same way. And Iran is this huge, incredible linguistic place with tons of languages that are facing threats because, like
Yes,
anywhere else,
yes.
standard Persian is like the English of
Yes.
Iran. Everybody should speak the same way.
Yes.
And so there's, kids who grow up speaking Gilaki and then go to school and lose their language because they're taught standard Persian.
Spot on. But there is a sliver of like this Persian accent thing that is, I think that we should, that Persians make fun of. There was that like video that came out with those, that song where they were making fun of the Persian accent. I mean, is really unattractive. I mean, if there's a course that anyone, I don't care if it's a capitalist money-making endeavor, if there's a course to detangle that from the otherwise beautiful Persian accent.
But how would we know people were Iranian if they didn't have that accent?
But our dad didn't have that. There's so many different. There's variations on it, right? There's different. Yeah.
There are.
Yeah. Anyway, that's another. I'll get into some of the way people say things on the next one. Jila, thank you so much for taking the time midsummer to address this issue and to come on, Roqe. It's been such a pleasure and an honor.
It's been a pleasure to talk to you as always.
I don't know much about you, but you must come from a great family. You must have a great sibling to be as smart as you are. That's
a really great sibling.
That kind of intelligence comes from having a younger sibling that enables it, I think.
I'm bummed that I had to out myself as the older one.
Yeah. Yes. No, that's correct. Thank you again.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Microphones are back on here in the studio with Pegah sitting here. Smart Pegah. You were listening along as I was talking about. It was so fun to have my sister on the show. She's the best.
I also love the banter between you two as siblings.
Mean, look, I knew she was going to go with everything's so PC. Like, she's a professor, so she has to say all the right things.
Yes.
Everyone has an accent.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, okay, we get it. Everyone gets a participation medal. We know what we're talking about here.
Yeah, but you know what? Funny enough, the minute that she said that, it was almost like a light bulb moment for me, right? Like, it sounds so simple, but in reality, I don't think I had ever even stopped to think, well, yeah, that is true. Every single person has their own distinct way of talking, and it could be called an accent. Or I guess by definition it is.
And it is an accent.
Yeah, exactly.
No, she said this to me before in the past because I get quite... I'm one of the prejudicial people that I've been talking about, like, where I go, that person needs to speak, and she'll say, look, you have an accent to me. And of course I'll respond, how dare you? This is an outrage. But I really appreciate it. I did actually learn a number of things there. It was great to have her on. So what was your takeaway? Did anything in particular stand out?
There was a couple things. The most surprising, I think, was when she mentioned that most people in the world are multilingual. That was like shocking for me. I didn't think that would be the case.
Although it makes sense.
But yeah, I mean, I guess when you think about it a little bit more,
even in Iran now, people who are listening to us, there's
exactly
English and at least, right? They probably speak Arabic, and so
and a whole bunch of other languages. So that was interesting for me. Like I said, that initial comment that she made, that was definitely a light bulb moment. And then there was a part where she was talking about standard English versus, like, let's say colloquial or slang and things like that.
Do you mean colloquial?
Colloquial? What did I say?
I don't even know if I'm saying it right.
You're just making fun of my accent.
The standard English way to say is colloquial.
I see.
Go ahead.
Or like slang. That part, I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, you know what? That is so true, because there's been so many cases where I've met Iranians, especially, who have just come to Canada, and they'll speak to me in English, and they'll speak so academically. And it's like, I often think, well, okay, is it because of the whole like formal thing that we have in Farsi where they're trying to be polite, or is it because, they prefer this way, or what's the situation? But I guess what your sister was saying about learning academic English in a certain way and then you carry that over, that makes total sense. So that definitely brought me back to a couple of experiences I had. And I was actually just thinking of the same thing in Farsi, where, I often find myself in positions where I try to speak to certain people and I'm confused about whether or not I can speak more Khodemuni or if I have to speak, so that made me think of that. I mean, I
was thinking, by the way, that I generally, I feel I generally feel comfortable that people, when I speak Persian, think it's sweet or cute or acceptable or admirable or whatever, that even if I have this heavy accent and this American accent or whatever it is that
Jian accent.
But actually, when I think about it, there are there's been time, especially when I've gone to parties with some hipster academic types that are all Persian, and I feel I do feel kind of embarrassed, or that I realize I'm speaking, I cannot communicate smart ideas. I sound like I sound like I'm in grade 5 or something when I talk. So and I live here, and it doesn't necessarily affect my employment or whatever, and so for somebody who's dealing with that, and that's a liability for work or for the other thing that Jila said that I thought was so interesting was she said everyone is trying to align themselves. Everyone is always trying to align themselves with a group of people.
Right.
And they, in some cases, use language to do that. This was in response to me saying, why do some people who've grown up here speak with what I perceive as a Persian accent or something like that? And just thought that was so interesting in general, because obviously this is universal when it comes to, say, clothing or music or types of behavior.
Right.
Always trying to align ourselves with a certain group of people.
Yeah.
That's part of the brand. And so why wouldn't language, the way you use language, be part of that? Right?
Although we didn't get an answer for that, I guess there's no academic study done on that or anything like that.
Yeah,
Your
she didn't
sister
have a
was saying,
name for it.
Which I'm so shocked, because that's definitely something I've thought about it as well. And I would imagine it's something that happens to a lot of immigrant communities where...
There was a word, though. She said... linguistic
no, she said the accommodation, which is the other way. No, but it wasn't for this. It was the other way around.
Okay.
Yeah, she was saying there's no word for this.
Glad you were listening. I tune out when my sister talks. Trauma from no, it was great. Now, what we wanted to do was go to some of the comments that we've had, and I suspect now we're going to have a lot more comments after this, because Dr. Ghomeshi said a lot of things there that I would love people to respond to. So by all means, post on our platforms, or you can email us at info@roqemedia.com and tell us your thoughts. But we had a bunch of comments that we had pulled before the interview that we wanted to talk about. So do you want to start with some? You've handed me some of them. We'll share them. And talk about a little bit about what the audience has been saying. So go ahead, Pegah.
Well, we'll start with Dr. Rosa Moradi, who we had recently on the show, and she mentions definitely impacted me professionally, especially when I was in the U.S., but not in Canada.
So this is in response to the question, the title of this episode, does having an accent make life harder? She is saying definitely when in the U.S., not in Canada.
Not so much in Canada.
Funny enough, I saw somebody say the opposite, or somebody say, I've had trouble in Canada, despite what you might think, or something like that.
Actually, I have that. I have that one. I think it's a little bit later on, but we have that comment as well. Then we have username Negarain, which is Negarina Cooper.
Negarina.
And she mentions...
Influencer.
Yes. Absolutely not. It's an advantage and charm that makes a person unique and exotic, in my opinion.
So in the answer to does having an accent make life harder, it's an advantage and charm. See, that's a great positive way of looking at this. However...
Here's the however.
It's not. However, it flies in the face of those studies that I was citing in the interview that Jila was agreeing with. I mean, the data shows that it does affect the way people see you negatively. In I guess many cases.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a big distinction between professional and personal life. I think that's now that I think about it a little bit more, I'm thinking maybe I can understand why. And this sounds horrible, but I can understand why maybe it would have an impact professionally and less so personally.
That doesn't sound horrible.
Well, it
that
does,
sounds
because
horrible
I'm
about the
basically
employers.
yeah, exactly.
But also someone like Negarina, we should have her on to explain what she means. But she is, I mean, I think she does a number of things, but she's a singer, but she's also has a big following on social media. It would make sense that the feedback to her on social media is, assuming she has an accent, is that that's so nice, exotic.
Yeah.
But getting a job at the thing that really stung was that study that I cited to Jila, that she said she's familiar with, the one where it says you are less trustworthy. People will think that what you're saying is less factual
Because you have an accent.
and the heavier the accent, the less they'll believe you. I mean, that's a
yeah. That says something about us as a whole.
prejudice.
You know?
Yeah.
Next we have Shirin Nasiri. She mentions definitely, although it's not my accent that makes life harder, it's their native English speaker's accent.
She's being funny.
I like that take.
The question is, does having an accent make life harder? Thanks for that, Shirin. There's another Shirin Mehriar, who says, very interesting topic. To me, having a Persian accent does affect my work, and it's annoying sometimes, LOL, but my nice coworkers coping with me. It's written this with a bit of an accent. Well, that's good. It does affect my work, but people
there's
are,
acceptance.
Yeah, acceptance.
That's
okay.
good. Move Like Ellie mentions, I was rejected because of my accent in an audition for a TV project. So clearly.
See? Legit.
Yeah.
Oh, here's that. Mahruch Boutimar says, does having an accent make life harder? Definitely. Especially here in Canada, unlike what is believed.
Yeah.
So you're not immune just because you're in a place that is full of immigrants and, sometimes I think that, there's, and, a number of people, I don't know if you pulled any of these, but also a number of people were talking about the difference between accents and places where the accents come from. I brought that up with Sheila. It's a tough one, right? Because it almost sounds racist to talk about it. We're like, oh, the French accent is so sexy. This one isn't, But that feels like very much to be Roqe about it.
Yes.
That's very much a reality too.
Exactly.
Some accents based on what we've been socialized, Hollywood, whatever, we see as negative, villainous, uneducated, whatever.
And the reverse. We've been conditioned to like certain accents.
Come on, what else you got there?
This one was interesting. Kamyar Yazdani poses a question. He says, have you even seen a top executive with an accent?
I love this question.
Yeah.
Because I was rolling it around in my head for a while. Have you seen a top executive with an accent? First of all, it presumes the top executives are here, because I'm assuming that in Shanghai, there's top executives,
of course, who definitely have an accent.
Maybe not when they're speaking Mandarin, though.
No, but I mean, if they were to speak English.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it was an interesting question, because off the top of my head, I had to search a little bit to come up with.
Well, see, I was saying, as soon as I read that, I was thinking about it, and I was thinking that I have seen executives who I can see visibly from their names or even from their appearance.
100%.
Make an assumption that they're immigrants,
whatever,
but they don't necessarily have an accent.
No.
They're either they've been brought up in the West or they've lost their accent along the way or whatever the case is. But although visibly they're an immigrant,
that's
they
right.
don't.
And even if like they're a Persian, they're a Dara Khosrowshahi type who doesn't speak with an accent. But imagine, like, the Persian guy is like the head of Starbucks, and he's like, in a Starbucks, our company is like, people would just be like, what?
Problematic.
Well, they're the same people who are not responding to the phone calls because they assume that they're
the customer service
that data, right? That was but I'm sure we're missing a lot of. I'm sure there's top executives. Also, we are, because of the nature of the show, or maybe because of the audience, or because of what we're thinking about. We're thinking about people from the Middle East.
Yes.
Surely there's top executives with, European
Russian,
or
for sure.
Japanese or something,
There was a comment, I actually have it. It's a couple of comments down, but someone makes a good point about the different fields and professions. So we'll get to that. I mean, it's a couple of comments forward, so I'll keep going through these. Right. Where were we? Venus 539 says, depends on the accent. Professionally, if the accent is Northern or Western European, there's a favorable bias. Societally, it depends on the location where the accent is quote-unquote spoken.
See, I don't think that's untrue. I think there's something to that.
For sure.
And like anything, right? It's like, I mean, we have studies that show that people who have more symmetrical faces are more considered more trustworthy.
We are such judgmental
It's
people.
Humans are the worst.
Yeah,
That's
we really
why
are.
I love dogs.
Yes, I
agree.
agree.
I don't think dogs are. By the way, did you love that question about do mammals have accents?
Yeah, that was great. I was thinking, does
she took
Oogie
me
have an
seriously. She
accent
was
there?
like, "Well, the studies on this show, but yeah, I mean, I don't think
True
Oogie,
academic.
Yeah, exactly. Everything's allowed. Everyone has
Yes.
an accent. Yeah. Okay.
Next we have Insta Fariba. 3 M's there. Yes, it does, but it also depends on where one lives and how diverse the community is. Everyone talks about having an accent, but what about listening to someone with an accent? How frustrating it is to have to listen to someone who you can't understand at all. I once had a professor who was Chinese with a very strong accent, and it was just impossible to understand.
And it goes on to say frustrating and awful, and no one learned anything.
Yeah.
I'm reading the same. So, well, it's not an illegitimate point. If somebody has a heavy enough accent that you have trouble understanding them, and the point is an educational institution that you're learning from them, I guess that's a...
But I guess they didn't have a problem getting the job.
Oh, look at you.
Right?
Let me read this again. Also depends on where one lives and how diverse the community. Everyone talks about having an accent, but what about listening to an accent? How frustrating is it to have to listen to someone whom you can't understand at all? I once had a professor who was Chinese with a very strong accent and was impossible to understand. It's a bit dodgy, though, isn't it? It's a bit like... I don't know if that accent... I mean, I don't know if this comment is the comment... I'm sure it's not meant this way.
Is the comment with an accent?
Is the comment offensive?
You know, I
don't understand the way this person talks. I mean,
okay,
let's take it at face value. You really actually had trouble understanding.
I've been in that position.
Okay.
I've taken a course
you're the person that people don't understand?
Maybe. Yeah. But no, I've taken a course where I had great difficulty trying to understand the professor's language, for a better word. He had such a strong accent, and it was so difficult to understand. And that's the professor's
problem?
No, I'm not saying it's anyone's problem. I'm just saying it was actually, maybe it was my problem because I was having difficulty understanding him. But I just mean to say, you know, I sympathize with Fariba here saying that she's been in that position because sometimes it is difficult. And this actually makes me think of things like, I don't know, like the person announcing the stations on the transport system. Would you want someone with a heavy accent that you may have difficulty understanding? Hey, I'm just being realistic here, right?
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying. Yeah.
Or I don't know, in a safety...
Or someone who speaks perfectly, like me.
Right.
Yeah, which one would you want?
Exactly. Or like a safety-sensitive situation. Would you want someone that's difficult to understand?
But the problem is, I think Jila was saying in the interview, like, there's all kinds of things that you telegraph with an accent. So if you had someone doing the subway announcements with a particular accent, the assumption would be you're trying to communicate something. Like, is this a subway for, like, it's like a person has a German accent, you go, oh, this must be a German subway or something. That's so interesting.
Yeah, I think there's definitely situations where the norm, like I don't know what to call it. Like,
well,
English,
there's no norm if everyone has an accent.
But you know what I mean? Like standard English,
yes.
like your sister was saying, right? Like standard English needs to be used in certain situations.
Yes.
Like subway announcements, safety sensitive situations, like the airport, I don't know, situations like that, right?
You're saying it must be used.
Yes, standard. Because I think that's... Am I going to take heat for this?
I think we're both saying...
we're both saying things.
Well, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's a hard one. If someone has a heavy enough accent that you can't understand them, you're paying to go to university and you can't understand your professor, I think that's a legitimate question. I don't think the answer necessarily is that it's the professor's fault, but I also don't think it's an illegitimate question.
Yeah.
I think that's why wouldn't you be allowed to question that?
Right.
You know.
I mean, I would question the university situation less than I would airport or a safety sensitive situation or public transport.
A safety
things like that.
sensitive situation is an interesting one.
That one I think is critical.
You have a flight attendant that people can't understand,
right?
Saying, "Put on your lifeguard."
Yeah, and then God forbid that plane is crashing.
Crashes.
There we go.
Yes.
And then you didn't hear the person and know how to put on your life jacket or something.
Right. Yet you're suggesting that the flight attendant should not have an accent to be hired for the job.
I'm just saying. I think for
these
certain
are issues.
Situations,
These are things
it's important to have a clear method of communicating.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
List with Desiree. I know. List with Desiree. And Desiree says, no doubt we find some accents entertaining or more amusing than others. But accents aren't just purely about how we speak. They are one of the most distinctive cues for where we come from. They immediately mark out who we are, and they form a core part of our identity. This can make it hard for marginalized and minority speakers to find a job, gain education, or even find a home. It takes just a moment for us to pass judgment on a person based on how they sound. This is a perfect comment. That summarizes what we've been talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Very, very well said. Okay.
Tara Sky 1. Absolutely. Having an accent can make everything more challenging, and you often face different treatment. Thankfully, in the fields of high tech and engineering, accents don't make a difference. However, when it comes to accessing services such as doctors, the story is quite different. You are often treated as if you belong to a lower stratum of society.
See, this was interesting.
This is the one I was saying about the different fields.
But what's worrisome about this is it's counterintuitive. You would think the doctor, what this person Tara seems to be saying that you're treated worse. She's been in an experience or seen somebody treated worse because they have an accent by a doctor.
That's horrible.
It's worrisome. That would be the place where you'd think that
there shouldn't be any judgment.
Right. This is as my sister said, when I was jokingly saying, should we pass judgment on,
right.
We shouldn't be passing judgment at all.
Yeah.
And this is, to be serious for a moment, this is anywhere where somebody is receiving lesser care or, lesser of anything.
Right.
Because they have an accent is terribly worrisome, right? That's a freaky comment.
Very.
However, when it comes to accessing services such as doctors, the story is quite different. You are often treated as if you belong to a lower stratum of society. I'm sure it happens.
Yeah.
I'm sure it happens. This is what racism is, right? It's like, here's a fancy white person who speaks this way. Let's let them in ahead of the line to the,
Gosh.
All right.
Bookmark.nature. Accent means I also speak another language other than English, and I am proud of it.
There you go. As you should be.
Definitely.
Still might not help you get a flight attendant job if Pegah's hiring. You've worked with airlines.
I do work with airlines.
So does are there rules? There's got to be.
There's definitely rules about how you present the safety instructions. Yes.
Yeah.
There are rules for that for sure.
Yeah. What else?
Shada Graham. You need to come to the elementary school and see some of the students make fun of your accent. So rude.
I'm sure.
Definitely in children. I think that's something that's they're bugged for.
All right. And I think you got one more, right?
One more, yes. Mernouche for life. The answer is no. In multicultural societies of today, especially in Western countries, everybody is from somewhere and everybody has an accent. It also depends on your self-confidence.
Well, you know what? Let's hope that's right.
Yeah.
Let's hope that's right. Thank you for that, Mayor Noosh. Thank you to all of these people who've written in and all of the rest of you who have been writing us in our email and also posting on our different platforms, your comments. It's great to get this conversation going. Please keep it going. If you have responses to either the interview with Dr. Jila or what Pegah and I have just been talking about, by all means, send them to us. We'd love to hear them, and we'd love to read them next week. Maybe we'll continue the conversation. Let's park the accent conversation for a moment. Before we wrap up today, we didn't do the Roqe Roundup yet because I wanted to get to Dr. Jila, who's waiting. But do you have a couple of things for the Roqe Roundup before we end off for this week?
Well,
episode 272.
I wanted to touch upon a couple of things that we've talked about over the last couple of episodes. So Tumaj Salehi, We
Yes.
talked about last week as well. So we've now heard.
Well, he wasn't sentenced yet last week.
That's what exactly.
Right,
so
right.
it's now confirmed. So last week we talked about we had speculated about certain things. There were some rumors, things like that. So now he has officially been sentenced. He's been given a sentence of 6 years and 3 months in prison. He's also been banned from leaving the country for 2 years. They're
This
revoking.
is the dissident Iranian rapper.
This is. And they're revoking his passport for 2 years. He's also going to be banned from any activity that has to do with music and singing for the duration of those 2 years. And all of this, might I remind everyone, is after 252 days of him being in solitary confinement.
What did you make of this?
What did
you of the sentence?
I mean, honestly, the sentences aren't even surprising to me anymore. They're ludicrous no matter what.
No, it's ludicrous, for sure.
But what is he receiving a sentence for in the first place? I mean, they're charging him for propagandist activity against the government.
No, it's
utter bullshit.
It's absolute bullshit and an absolute violation of any human rights around freedom of speech and expression or whatever. However, the reason I'm asking is I think it's a very deft move by the regime. It's weird, right? Because on the one hand, it's outrageous. On the other hand, it could have been worse. And so they're cutting off at the knees the sort of expectation that it was going to be lifetime or, God forbid, something, execution or that type of thing that would. So I feel like what I saw in social media as the news filtered out was a confusion around how to respond to this. Because on the one hand, people are outraged that Toomadge is detained at all, but on the other hand, after all that has been said and no, I mean, I think there was among some people probably some relief, like, okay, so within 6 years maybe he'll be out, and I mean, now we have sort of, it's not this amorphous what's going to happen, where is he, where so I saw some confusion around that.
Yeah, lots of confusion, lots of divide amongst how to feel about this, because like you said, there were some individuals who had said, they're relieved because at least this isn't, they aren't going to execute him, or at least it's not a lifetime sentence or things like that. But then I guess the question is, how is it that we feel comfortable being relieved with that when this person has done nothing to even be in prison in the first place, right? But me personally, I think this is the maximum that the regime could have done without severe backlash, if that makes sense. I almost feel like if they had,
which is sad.
But I mean,
yes,
all of this is sad.
Yes.
But I think, if they had given him lifetime in prison, or if they had even wanted to execute him, I think the reaction and
that's
the
what I'm
backlash
saying.
would be so severe.
It was a deft move.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what I think. But
okay.
All of it is very, very sad. The other thing I wanted to touch upon was Robert Malley. Our
old friend.
Our old friend, O'Malley.
Yeah. The former, right? Former Iran envoy to the U.S., the Biden administration, special envoy. Yeah.
Still not officially former. They haven't pulled his he's
the
just on
weirdest
leave.
thing.
Yeah, it's very murky. All of this is very murky, but and that's why I wanted to touch upon it, because last week, we were just starting to hear about this, and there was an investigation going on, which is still going on, by the way, and that's why we still don't know if his title has been dropped or not. But a couple more details have emerged, so we now know that the FBI is also looking into this. So that in and of itself is huge. They're looking at how he had handled classified materials.
Wow.
So perhaps some mishandling of information. There's been some reports that the State Department was very frustrated with him because he wasn't sharing information with the State Department, at least not in a timely manner, to the point where a committee chair actually asked for deadlines to be imposed on him for him to have or give access to certain information, which is crazy to think that he would be withholding information or not passing them over in a timely fashion. And then this, of course, led to Congress being involved, and then Congress had made some statements saying that they were misled about the reasons that he was absent. That's where we had the news of the family health matter, which we now know is not the case. There was not a health matter. So all of this is still very murky.
He's another cause for confusion because, on the one hand, he's been the at the epicenter of our vitriol of inaction by the Biden administration or the U.S. or even enabling the regime and aching to get back into that nuclear deal and all that. And we pinned a lot of that on him, and people were saying, resign, Robert Malley, you don't care about the Iranians, whatever. On the other hand, it's part of me goes, why do we even care about this guy? Like, you know.
Well, the reason we care is because if he's been colluding with the Islamic regime.
Well, that's true.
Right?
That's true.
That
but I mean, it's not like if Robert Malley is gone, the administration is going to have some new person with a completely different, action plan, because they're acting as to their own interests as an administration. One assumes. So it's not like one person is going to make that kind of difference, probably. But you're right. If there's some wild collusion thing going on,
that would be what would be interesting. But speaking of his deputy, Abrams Pally, who's now the serving acting special envoy for Iran, I'm surprised at how quiet he's been. We haven't heard anything from him. Say? Well, I don't know. I mean, he's stepping into a very sensitive situation. He hasn't so much as to made a statement, nothing. So we'll see what comes of that. But that was the roundup. Just wanted to touch upon a couple of things from last week.
Thank you, Pegah.
Thank you.
And again, with our conversation about accents, we'd love to hear from you guys out there. By all means, post on our platforms or email us at info@roqemedia.com. We'll continue the conversation. And if there are questions that we didn't get to, that I didn't properly ask of my sister, we'll have her back. We'll continue the conversation. Thank you again. This is Full Time for Roqe for today. Remember, for all things Roqe related, head over to our website, roqemedia.com, where you can see our back episodes, our history series, our funnies, our videos, our moments, and Roqe the experts. roqemedia.com is the destination. Thanks to the amazing team who put this show together each week. Savi Rohan, Bearded Omid, Super Parisa, Talented Anahita, Smart Pegah, and Sound Person Louise. Thank you to all of you out there for supporting us and sharing our content. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already on any or all of our platforms. You can find me on Instagram at Jian Ghomeshi. In the meantime, as ever, Mizun Bashi.